Warning, listening to this show may result in increased levels of inspiration, motivation, and innovation. Side effects can include the immediate urge to take massive action to build a better business and life for yourself and others. You've been warned. Welcome to Influencers Radio with your host, Jack Mize.
And welcome back to another episode of Influencers Radio. You know, we all face challenges in life, day-to-day challenges of work stress, responsibilities of parenthood. But those challenges can evolve into bigger issues like obesity, depression, and unfortunately, we can develop some pretty unhealthy and even dangerous habits without even realizing it. We just seem to, let these things happen. And one day we realize that we're fat, we're depressed, and we ask ourselves, how did this happen? We may make a decision to change or reverse the damage and figure out, and we figure out that it really was a lot easier to let things happen than it is to make things happen. Well, today my guest is Bryan Falchuk, and he has an amazing story. He went from being obese and depressed to running marathons. He's faced nearly losing his wife to illness while their young son watched. He became vegan in just one day, and he got his master's degree from a top school and rose to a senior executive position in a successful business. And today, Bryan is a certified personal trainer and behavior change specialist. And he's helping the masses with his best-selling book, Do a Day, where he shares the approach that he developed to transform his life. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So welcome to Influencers Radio, Bryan.
Oh, thanks very much, Jack. It's great to be here.
Well, I tell you, I love talking with folks with these types of transformations because it, takes what a lot of people think is the impossible to the possible, and sometimes even what people think is maybe possible to the probable if they just have the right, the right track or roadmap to do that. So I think your story begs that the first question would be is around you being obese, and now you're running marathons. So let's talk about that. So when you talk about obese, what does that mean, and how did that happen?
Yeah, so it was most of my childhood into my teen years. And like for so many Americans, while I had lost weight at one point, it slowly crept back in. So I spent basically from the age of 4 or 5, the timing tied with my parents splitting up. And, a lot of kids face that and it has a lot of ramifications for them. And obviously when you're that young, you don't really understand. But you seek comfort and you've got emotional pain that you don't necessarily know how to deal with. And look, one of the most comforting things out there that doesn't judge and doesn't get mad at you is food. And, very quickly that became my emotional crutch and how I sought solace and comfort. And, my parents were busy, not just with myself and my 3 siblings, but jobs and divorce and, all the disruption that comes with that. And so I turned to what was there for me, and that was what was in the cupboards. And I started to gain weight, as I said, 4 or 5 years old or so. You can see the pictures of me back then where you start to see I was thin, and then I started to get bigger. And it got pretty bad. So I was around 100 pounds overweight by the time I was in 6th or 7th grade. And it just kept going up from there. And I basically stopped counting or stopped checking my weight after 248. It's a number that sticks in my brain. But I did continue to get bigger because I had to keep buying bigger pant sizes. And it was, this is something I talk about in my book and my coaching work with people. But I was really lucky to find someone to help guide me on a path. To have a different relationship with health and wellness. And that's what sparked my initial weight loss, which was as I was finishing up high school. But the story doesn't end there. And it doesn't for a lot of people. There's plenty of people who were athletes in college or high school, and they find themselves really overweight later in life. But, I face the same sort of things that we all face as responsibilities at work and parenthood and mortgages and, all these things start to add up. slowly but surely, we start to go back down that path. And I wouldn't say I ever looked obese again. I just describe it as I looked American. No one would have really stopped and said like, oh, he's really overweight. But the reality is I had gotten to the low 220s, so not that far off of where I had been before. And unlike when I was a kid, I couldn't just say, well, I'm growing, I'm getting taller, so the weight's okay. I obviously had stopped growing many years before that. And there is this pivotal moment that I talk about around my wife's illness where, the way I phrase it is our son, who was just about 2, this is the summer before he turned 2. He's watching his mother, who at that point had become bedridden and was wasting away, and no one could do anything about it or knew what was wrong. He's watching his mother die, and he's watching his father die just at a much slower rate. And that was my light bulb moment, and the point where my motivation and my clarity all hit me. And that's really where the notion of do a day started to form for me.
Well, you brought it up at the top of the show about how, and you even mentioned it, how this creeps up on you. It's something that a lot of people don't notice until that one day when you somehow get clarity. You clean the mirror or something and think, well, wow, how did this happen? And so, when you make that decision that, I've got to do something about this. Well, there's a big difference in just saying I got to do something about this and actually doing it, because you find out that it's a lot more challenging. To make that happen. And in your book, Do a Day, you say the revolution started with a revelation.
Yeah.
So what exactly does that mean?
So that is, if I could step back for 1 second, I'd say it's a hair growing problem, weight loss or weight gain and so many others. It's, you don't wake up and all of a sudden your hair is at your feet. Slowly but surely it grows. And then you're like, I got to get a haircut. And that's your revelation with your hair is like, your ears hurt or whatever it is, you look shaggy. So with weight gain, or really, this isn't just about weight loss. This is about any challenge that you're facing, any difficulty. There comes a moment for a lot of us where we have this point of clarity and it all hits us. And for me, it was, I know the exact date. It was June 30th, 2011, looking at my wife, and my son was standing by my side. And it's just that moment, seeing her in bed, seeing him next to me. And I looked back and forth between him and her. And I just said, what am I doing? Because this little boy is seeing, he's experiencing and seeing something that no kid should have to go through. And I'm not really there for him in the way I need to be. So I'm not a model of health myself. I was really unhappy. It just was not a good situation at all. And so it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was that revelation that he is my motivation. There's something really profound. It's not about losing weight for beach season or a wedding or whatever else might be out there. It's something a lot bigger than that. And that was my revelation, is seeing that the reasons why I might have lost weight before weren't deep enough, profound enough, enduring enough to mean I lost weight and then entered a new period where that's how I was. I wasn't someone who was always losing weight. I was someone who just was fit.
And you mentioned something that I want to make sure that we don't skip over and actually put a spotlight on, because I think it's important that, you lost nearly 100 pounds, all right, which is a huge feat for a lot of folks, to say the least. But I've got to think that a transformation like that has to be more than just about physical weight loss. You talked about it's not about, looking good for the beach and things like that. So what were some of the other changes that you experienced on that journey?
Yeah, the weight loss is the least important part of it. The weight loss follows. It's like a symptom, but in a good way. And that's why, I was talking to someone recently about the coaching work that I do. And they said, what kinds of things do you get into with your clients? And it's especially someone who comes for weight loss or for fitness. And I say, you can't help someone in a meaningful and enduring way if you're just going to talk about going to the gym and eating better, because ultimately they're going to end up in the same place, because there are other reasons why they're overweight. And that was the case for me. As a kid, it was tied to what was going on in my family, and that established a set of patterns, emotional patterns and eating patterns, and the opposite of physical activity. I don't want to say laziness, but physical inactivity patterns. Preference for watching TV. And of course, when I do that, I'd have a big glass of soda and a snack. And, all these kinds of things all go together. It wasn't about the food choices or the activity choices. It was about my entire life. And so when we talk about losing weight, it's not a quick fix, and it's not something you compartmentalize. The way that you do it successfully is by looking at the whole. It's a much deeper, more introspective approach that not everyone is always ready for. And I'd raise my hand and say, that's the real reason why I had to do it twice. I lost weight the first time as a teenager. Guess what? I was a slightly different person in my 20s and 30s than I was when I was 15, 16, 17. And so that means the reasons why I did it back then weren't necessarily tied to who I was anymore. And they weren't necessarily big enough reasons to stick with me through my life, whether they were, specific to that point in time or not. They just couldn't endure. And it took me getting to a different place in my life and a different place in my self-exploration to understand, what a real motivation could be.
And, something that I think is important here is a lot of times we'll justify that, whether it's losing weight, someone wants to quit smoking, any big change that someone recognizes that they need to take control of, they'll put I'm going to do that as soon as things calm down. And you couldn't wait for things to calm down. I mean, you're dealing with stressful situations. Your wife was, clearly not doing well. And you see that you're in this position where a lot of people would say, once all this, dies down, this hectic, I'm going to make a change. But, what is it that motivates someone to, in the midst of all this, say, what, I'm just going to add one more piece of trauma to my life.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic point. And there really is let's be honest with ourselves. There's never a good enough time to do anything. Anytime people talk about diets, and, I was there with myself so many days. I'd wake up and be like, okay, today I'm going to stop making those bad foods. I'm not going to eat that cookie. And sure enough, there's cake at work because it's someone's birthday. And of course I had the piece of cake. I just had this meaningful discussion with myself about that morning that I wouldn't eat. There's never a good enough time. There's never going to be a lack of temptation. There's never going to be enough free time, any of that. It's not about waiting for perfection, because that's not life. It's about making time and making reasons to keep going. So by that, I mean, let's look at an example. Let's look at exercise. I happen to enjoy running, which is something I never thought I would say, but I do. When I talk to other people about my running, it's like, I could never run. I would never want to do that. I hate running. Whatever word choice they want to use, it's like a punishment. That's fine. Guess what? You don't have to run to be in shape. And exercising doesn't have to mean running. It doesn't have to mean a piece of cardio equipment. It doesn't have to mean you do a great talk with someone in my family about this. They're like, well, I don't have an hour to do cardio at the gym every day. I said, well, that's okay. Who said you have to do it for an hour? And like, well, I read somewhere that if you do less than an hour, it doesn't count. I said, in what universe is that reality? Let's talk about what you actually enjoy doing, and then craft a program out of that. So there's this notion that it's like a punishment. Well, it's never going to be the right time for a punishment. You're certainly not going to stick with it. So let's find ways to, rather than looking at it as adding one more thing, which is not sustainable, let's find a way to get you towards your goal that is more positive and you actually enjoy. So, talking to someone the other day who loves to dance and they hate going to the gym. So, what can we craft around dancing? Because that's great physical activity, and it's fun, and it's positive, and it's social. And, there's other ways to skin the cat that are actually positive, reinforcing, and you will find yourself wanting to make time for. We just need a bit of exploration to figure those out.
Well, you made a subtle point there when you said get you towards your goal. And I think a lot of folks, when they think about, losing 100 pounds, for example, that's a huge leap from going from here to I'm going to lose 100 pounds. And a lot of people would think of that as being insurmountable. And it seems like
absolutely,
your philosophy and your strategy kind of breaks that down or breaks down that barrier for sure. So let's talk about that. What exactly is Do a Day?
Yeah. So the weight loss is the most tangible, obvious goal that I think a lot of people can relate to, but this really applies to anything. But let's stick with weight loss because it's an easy one, I think, for a lot of people to key in on. So if you have 100 pounds or 150 or 20 or whatever the number is, it probably feels pretty impossible to you. And, the number of people who have had 15 pounds to lose for more than 15 years, that everyone's got some amount of weight that they're trying to lose and they have a difficulty with it. And maybe they've made progress, but then they're stuck at a certain point. So it feels impossible no matter what your number is to a lot of us. And some of those numbers really are in and of themselves impossible. I mean, I've worked with people who needed to lose over 300 pounds. How do you fathom that? But it's like a mountain. When you climb a mountain, you don't just step to the top. It's a series of steps and hand grabs and movements along the way. And each one matters for itself. And each one is adding to your goal. So 100 pounds is just that. It's 100 pounds. It's not a singular thing. And the way that you get there is through a series of actions, a series of choices, a series of days that add up to that bigger goal. But when you look at it as 100 pounds, you either won't start or you'll soon quit because that's too much for most people to deal with. So what we do instead, and this is where Do a Day really comes in, is it's about freedom and it's about mindfulness. So instead of looking at a mistake you made yesterday and judging your choices today by that, and instead of feeling the weight of everything that lies ahead of you, you're not dealing with those things today. So you can make a different choice today in support of your goal. Whether you screwed up yesterday, whether you will screw up tomorrow, or whether you still have so much to go, you can still make a better choice today that gets you further down the path. It's not black and white, it's gray. So everything you do in a positive way will get you in a better position. It's not like one little mistake ruins everything. And I love this example because I think we've all been there. You're on a diet, or someone who's on a diet if it's not you. And there's someone's leaving work, and so everyone goes out for drinks, and you start off just having water because you're being really good, and then you maybe have a beer, and then there's nachos, and they look really good, or maybe buffalo wings. I will say, as a vegan, buffalo wings are one of like the three things I miss. So I was a total buffalo wing addict. But let me put that aside. So you have some of the things that don't really coincide with how you're trying to eat these days or how you're trying to make better choices. And then you go home and you're really upset with yourself and you order a pizza and eat the whole thing because you've already ruined everything by having those chips and the beer. If you stop and think about it, if you've lost 20 pounds or 15 pounds on a journey of health and you had some nachos and a beer, the percentage impact you've just had on your progress is less than 1%. So did you really throw everything away? Did you have to go and eat that pizza because you were upset with yourself? Well, even if you did, let's say you do all of those things, the next morning, you don't have to continue on that destructive path. You can say, you know what? I did mess up last night. I did do things that I'm not aligned with anymore, that don't fit with where I'm trying to go. So today I will do better. So you let go of that. It's not a way to write off a mistake. It's not a way to just, act in whatever manner you want without any consequences. But it's a way to stop beating yourself up over something that may actually not be as destructive as you think. And what I found is the way we beat ourselves up is actually where the destruction comes from, because that's what keeps us from getting back on the path and continuing on to our goals.
I've got to say, and that story is a perfect example. When I first picked up the book, I think I had a bit of a preconception as I was, really getting my head around the concept. I thought, well, okay, so this is really about, just taking it one day at a time. But it turned out to be more than that. Can you expand on that and the difference between, do a day and just taking something one day at a time and, brushing it off?
Yeah. Well, so you're not alone in having that thought. When people see the title and maybe read the back of the book or hear me talk about it, that's often where they go to, because that's a common phrase that, a lot of people have heard. And actually, I would say they're a bit different. And there's a couple reasons why. One is one day at a time has this notion of sort of just grit your teeth and just sort of get through whatever it is you're dealing with. Tough time at work, marital problems, illness, whatever it may be. It's just, you just have to kind of bear down and deal with it, and it'll all be over soon. as we've been talking today, I hope you see it's not so much that sort of passive, like just weather the storm. If you take the storm analogy, it's about putting on your raincoat and getting an umbrella. So you're actually going to take actions and you're going to continue on your path. You're not just going to, sit there and wait for it to pass or just grit through it. You're going to do things proactively to better your situation. So in terms of the words behind them, but in meaning, I think it's a much more empowering, proactive way of going about things. And that's really important, because you're not going to own your life. You're not going to own your outcomes and your achievement if it's all just sort of happening to you.
And as simple as the concept may sound, it's obviously something that we completely miss. We ignore, or just aren't aware of a strategy like this, because we do when it comes to dieting, if we do have those nachos or that beer, something triggers in us like, well, I blew it now, I might as well
absolutely
go all in. What kind of flipped the switch in your brain, and how did you come up with this idea of do a day?
Yeah. So it's funny. It was actually a book I was reading by this vegan ultra endurance athlete named Rich Roll. Fantastic book. He changed his life. He was overweight, alcoholic, entertainment attorney, just really bogged down in life. And he totally transformed his life, and he had an aha moment. He was named, I think it was in 2011, one of the fittest men in the world. He does these ultra endurance, double Ironman triathlons. He was one of the first 2 people to do 5 Ironman triathlons in a week or less, and 5 different. I mean, it's just, the story's insane. And when you get his backstory and you see what he's overcome, it's really powerful. So he's a vegan, and he's talking about that in his book. And I've read books by other vegans that didn't necessarily make me want to try it, but there's something in the way he did it. It was one evening, it was like 8 p.m, so I didn't really have any time to go and do any planning around it, but I just said, you know what, let me give this a shot. I'll do it tomorrow, because I can do a day. And I literally said that out loud. And that, it just kind of stuck with me. It's like, yeah, anyone can do a day. No matter what the challenge is, we can all get through one day of any tough challenge, right? And I went in with that mentality. So I freed myself of this notion of like, well, what if I can never eat this thing I love again? Or what about, I ate eggs pretty heavily then. I had eggs every morning for breakfast as part of my idea around my fitness. And so I was like, how could I not have eggs? I can not have eggs for a day. So, all of these notions of like, am I going to be the weird guy in the corner at a birthday party refusing the cake? Am I going to never go out to eat with my family? Like any of these things, they all just went away because it's just tomorrow. And so I woke up, I did a day, and it was really easy. It was actually a lot easier than I had been eating before, because it was just, it's clear if something, if you look in a salad, you can see if there's a hunk of steak in it. The way I had been eating before, I was trying to avoid sugar, whether added or natural. And so I always had to scrutinize the ingredients. It's like you can't eat carrots and you can't eat beets and you can't eat fruit. And so I was constantly having to look at everything and think a lot. And it's exhausting because it's just food. So I actually found that day to be really liberating, instead of being this constraining thing, which is how I had always thought about it before. And I was like, you know what? I'll do tomorrow. And that, then it was 2 days, and that's been over 2 years now. So it was this idea that like, it hit me then, both the phrase, but also that notion of just let go of the handcuffs of all the impossibilities and all the difficulties. It's like you were saying before, is like, you're waiting for that perfect moment. Well, if you stop caring about needing a perfect moment, it's a lot easier to just get on with it and be successful. So that was that moment for me.
And I think there's probably a big V8 moment happening for a lot of folks right now, because with just about any challenge, whether you apply this, you can apply this to smoking. It's not, I'm going to quit smoking.
Yes.
It's, I'm going to do a day without cigarettes. Right.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it becomes achievable.
Yeah.
Where it may not seem achievable before. One thing that comes to mind is, in today's, I guess, pop psychology, there's a term that you often see called a life hack, especially when you see, athletes or people that have done really dramatic and remarkable things with their lives. that seems to be this term life hack applied to it, which is kind of implies a shortcut or something like that.
Quick and easy.
Yeah, quick and easy. So would you do a day in that category of a life hack?
Yeah, I wouldn't. So I in 2011, one of the things that I was into was another life hack. So there's another author out there who's got a whole series of books that the theme is basically how to hack your life to get better results. And I gave it a try, and I think there are aspects of it that worked, but the reality is there was none of the work behind it to make it stick. And what I've come to learn is that's all that matters. It's not any of the discrete actions we take. It's why we're taking them, because that's what will continue on. So if you're following someone's plan, where's your growth? Where's your understanding of what motivates you and keeps you going? It's not there. We as a society love the quick fix. We love the instant gratification, and that's actually getting a lot worse. There's a lot of studies around that. Our attention spans are shortening. There's all sorts of things that would push people to the life hack approach. But the reality is one life hack will just lead to a need for another. I would rather we slow down, and going right back to that hair growing or slow weight gain idea. You didn't gain 100 pounds in a minute. Your hair didn't hit the floor, the morning after you woke up, or the morning when you woke up after going to bed. It took some time. So do you really think that some 10-day instant, 6-pack ab or life hack kind of approach is actually going to get you to a place where you're now going to be in a steady state where 10 years from now, you'll still be exactly the same? Probably not. Because what growth have you gone through? And that growth piece, that's a scary thing for a lot of people, because it means you have to face yourself. You have to look within and see what really makes you tick. What are your issues? What are your insecurities? What are your fears? You have to be very honest with yourself. And I think in today's society, a lot of us don't do that. We don't take the time for that. Or maybe we're scared to. And sometimes you need help to get there, whether it's a therapist or a coach or a mentor or whatever, that's okay. But it is really important that you actually do it the right way, because what you will build through that process for yourself and your skill set that's what's going to keep it enduring.
I guess the way I'm hearing it is, I guess a life hack is more of a physical or tactical strategy to use. But what you're talking about with do a day is a shift in the mindset as well to kind of change the way you think about this in your life.
And you could use life hacks to help you get there. So there are life hacks around creating more free time in your day. And you may need that to create time to read the books you want to read, or to exercise, or to, spend more time with whatever it is you're trying to work on. That's fine. But to have the end goal be solely driven by a life hack, I think is a dangerous way to, it is tactical. You're absolutely right. And that's not what lives are. If you want to be tactical with your life, you're not really going to get anywhere. Ultimately, your life's just going to happen.
So it seems like do a day is more of a philosophy and a mindset shift that can actually get you to be the person that would take action and implement a life hack, if that's what would solve these microcosms of problems that you may have. So let's talk about that. We mentioned about, do a day. I'm going to do a day without meat. I'll do a day without cigarettes. What are some other examples of situations that do a day can be used for?
Yeah, so it really does apply across the gambit, and there are a number of situations that I myself have used it for, or coached people to use it for, and I've been getting feedback from people who've read the book in totally different situations than I had foreseen or that I've experienced myself. So I structure the book to walk through a few specific themes that I've used it for, and that's things like weight loss, like running a marathon. Issues at work, tough times in a job, relationship issues, parenting issues. We're talking about negatives. It actually can apply to positives too, which I think is really surprising. So I use an example of the days when I had first met my wife and was, completely just smitten and worthless. Like every time I saw her, I forgot how to speak. And then every time I anticipated seeing her, I'd forget how to speak. So there was this like, I talk about the future burden. So the idea of still having 100 pounds to lose. Well, I went through so many of my days being like, well, what if I see her then? And what am I going to say? And I so consumed myself with all the what ifs of like wanting to make sure I made a great impression that I missed several of my interactions with her because she caught me off guard. And my mind was just free enough to have a normal, natural interaction with her because I was so stuck on like the planning of it. And it's not just for negative things. It can also be, do you even get to experience the good stuff, or is your mind so caught up in all of it that you don't even get there? But moving, that's a really painful thing a lot of people have to deal with, and not just the actual move, but everything leading up to it. Buying a house, finding out it's a long, drawn out process. Relationships fall apart through the process of moving or building a house. I had someone who's using it for a huge landscaping job that they're doing at their home. They're basically relocating a rock wall, and they're doing it one stone at a time, which, do a day. They made each stone a day. They didn't happen to do one stone a day, but they were looking at this wall for about 2 years and just felt like we'll never get this done. And so they'd never start it. And I sent him a copy of my book, and he read it, and lo and behold, the wall was moved because they looked at it totally differently. So, I mean, when I say it can apply to everything, I truly believe that it can. I haven't personally experienced everything, but I know people who have used it in dealing with cancer, in the death of a spouse. I'm very blessed that my wife is still here, but that wasn't a given. And I know people who have lost their spouse and used that approach and gotten through. So it's pretty far reaching.
Well, let's examine that a little bit. Can you give us one more example, or one that comes to your head? Because I know you've worked with a lot of folks in applying the do-a-day philosophy and to their lives and their problems. What's an example of someone who has implemented the do-a-day successfully and had the kind of transformation that you talk about?
So there's one person that instantly comes to mind whenever I'm asked about that. And it's a client who came to me around weight loss and fitness. She had been an athlete in college, and since then, she's a recent graduate, but she had very quickly put on weight, living at home with her parents in a job she really didn't care for, and was sort of directionless. Not completely, but she wasn't really sure what she actually wanted to do with herself. And this is why I say it's not about one aspect. It's not, when she said, I want to talk about weight loss, that's great. But I knew that there was a lot more to the story. And so her story is a really good example of how cohesive and holistic this really is. So rather than talking about one aspect of the situation, I think it's the full picture where the value is. And that's what most people have found. So she, we talked about her physical activity. We talked about her food choices, all of that, because those are just basics that are good to have. She really despised working out on cardio machines. So I helped her figure out, okay, what is it that you enjoy physically, and how do we bring that into your life? So one of the things that she started doing was she started to ride her bike to work. She didn't live too far away. She loved riding her bike and never seemed to find time for it. And it was actually a really rideable route. So she started to do that. And it was like one little thing, but that got her to a better place physically. And then she started to be more active in other ways. So that was a positive kind of snowball. But it also helped her to feel more empowered herself. And so as we worked through, her fitness situation and her health situation, we'd start to talk about the other reasons why she wasn't feeling good. So she really had an issue with living at home. She gets along great with her parents, but it wasn't about that. It was sort of the feeling of my life has started, but it hasn't. And that sort of being trapped in between things. And that was very agitating and unsettling. So we talked about that a lot to think about, okay, well, you can just sit here and continue on that path. Or let's talk about the steps you can take to get there. So not, what are you going to do for the next 20 years, but what are you going to do tomorrow? So what is something we can talk about in the next 2 or 3 days that can help you to move forward? And so then you can start to look at, well, do you have the savings to get your own place? Is your income where it needs to be? So you start to build this path of tangible, actionable things to focus on that cumulatively achieve the goals. So I will say today, She's in fantastic shape. I mean, I just saw a picture of her on Facebook, and kudos to her. She's in great shape. She has gotten her master's. She's in a job that she absolutely loves. And this is her second job since the one that we had talked about. And she loved the one she went to, but her master's has opened up the door for her to do something else. She's in her second apartment since she moved out from her parents' place, and she lives in just this fantastic neighborhood in Boston. So she loves where she lives. And she just told me the other day, she's now coaching people, which to me is like, that's the icing on the cake. To know that the whole reason why I do this, the whole reason why I put the book out is to help as many people as I can. So to know that there's this multiplicative effect from the path that I helped her start on, that she's now doing that with others, that's fantastic. So that to me is just a really holistic, great story of someone taking this approach and really transforming the many aspects of their lives that are intertwined in really not being happy.
You've really, the idea of do a day is really, it's a simple idea. You've done a fantastic job of breaking it down, both in strategy and tactically, in your book. But sometimes, people, we come to see that sometimes these types of strategies are oversimplified when the word just becomes a very prominent.
Just is a dangerous word.
Yeah. Just do this. And what comes to mind is, remember the old, the movie, comedy Airplane?
Yeah.
There's there's Lloyd Bridges, that his whole character is, you get the flight, the crew is all sick and everything. And he's just constantly, I picked a bad day to quit drinking. I guess I picked the wrong day to quit smoking. I guess I picked the wrong day to quit sniffing glue. Right. So it's more than just about, quitting. How can this work in situations of that extreme stress? That, yes, I need to quit smoking, but there happens to be layoffs going on right now at work. How do you mix it in there and apply it in those extreme stress situations?
So this is the non-simple part of it. So I want to keep the concept simple, relatable, something people can absorb, but the actual work behind it is pretty real. And so the thing that gets you through those pieces is the single most crucial part of do a day is understanding your real motivation. And let's not forget, I did all of this while my wife was not necessarily going to make it. I mean, her doctors had given up on her. And if she continued to lose, she was losing 2 pounds a day. She'll kill me if I say what her weight was, but it was extremely low. She wouldn't kill me, but she wouldn't be happy with me either. It was not a given that she'd be around. And we have a 2-year-old who, I would then be alone with. I had not a great situation at work. There's a big political issue going on above me, and my boss's direct reports were paying the price for that. I was one of them. So I had a very unstable situation at work with a lot of game playing and backstabbing and, really emotionally unsettling. And my weight wasn't great. I mean, I had a number of really heavy things. I'm the sole provider for my family. So I can't lose my job. I can't just stop working to take care of my family. So that was pretty serious. And in the midst of all that, I still was able to transform my life. And it's for the sole reason that I really figured out what my motivation is and what I truly care about. And that's the second part of the book. And the thing where I spend the most time with people on is figuring out their real why. What is it that's actually that would make you move ahead, that would make you achieve, that would help you get through? Because that's the only thing, when that storm is pelting you hard, that's the only thing that keeps you true. So for me, it was around my son. And, I talk about some specific reasons why why that was a good motivation for me. I can't answer that for anyone else because you have to figure it out. I can help you figure it out. And I pose a lot of the questions and the kinds of things that you need to work on to get there. But I found a lot of books in this space and a lot of people in this space will tell you, answer these 3 questions and we'll spit out your answer of what your motivation is. That's a life hack. That doesn't work. You have to be the one to figure it out, and I'll help you on the journey. But that journey, that real discovery, that's going to come up with something that's so profound that it will endure whatever these issues are that you're getting hit with. And I've seen that firsthand. I mentioned people who have faced cancer, who have faced the loss of a spouse. Those are really, really serious things. So if they can get through while that's going on, I'm quite sure that if you have the right motivation behind you and you're pointing it in the right direction, you will not be stoppable. You also have to believe that you're not going to be stoppable. And that's really important, is that confidence and that strength. And I think, again, that comes from the motivation.
Well, given what you just said, I'm going to press you here, because I know there's someone listening right now who's been shaken by this.
Yeah.
It's made sense. They're motivated, and they may need something to just flip the switch. Can you give some ideas on how someone can put this approach into action if they, when they finish listening to this, that's that first thing they can do? Maybe they'll order the book, and they'll follow you to find out more, but they really need something just to flip that switch.
Yeah. So, yes, you can do all those things. And the point of the book is to try to help people figure that out. It's what I do when I coach people or mentor people. And I can't do that for everyone, which is that is literally why I wrote the book. But, there are some specific questions that you can ask yourself to try to get there. And that's one of the things that I present in the book, and I can talk about some of those. But I think if I could offer one question for people to start with, it would be just very simple question, very tough answer. Regardless of what is happening, where you're at in life, what will you always care about? And that's a tough question if you really stop and think about it. And some people will jump on an answer. And if I'm coaching them, I'll challenge them on that. And they start to realize, well, no, I guess, if this was going on, then that would be my priority. Or it's not to say you wouldn't deal with other things first. It's like if the thing you care about most is your family, and, your foot was on fire, like, yeah, you would stop and put the fire out. If your kid needed lunch, they could wait a minute. But it's sort of the bigger questions, like, what is it that you really care about above everything else? If you can hone in on that and explore that, you will start to find your real motivation. Not everyone can do that in every moment. So it takes a certain headspace. And that's why this can take some time. That's one of the things that I talk about in the book, is you're going to have to be willing to make time to think about yourself and what drives you. Unless you're already in touch with your real motivation, you have to invest in figuring that out and asking yourself questions and being willing to challenge yourself. And sometimes that does take help. And that's, I say that plainly, is you may need to get someone from the outside who can push back, who can, give you that challenge. Because we're not always able to be that honest with ourselves, or we may not understand, and that's okay. But I think that as a starting point is, no matter what else is happening, what will you always care about? Think about that.
Well, you know what? I'm going to flip the question on you. What is it? What's your motivation? And what is your hope and goal in getting this message out there with your book? Do a day to getting this out to so many people.
Yeah, so it is literally to help as many people as I can. And the thing that I've enjoyed most about this work is, that story I related about that client I had. That is the most uplifting thing I can get out of this, is getting involved with someone who's facing something serious, and it may not be serious to someone else, but it's serious to them, helping them to transform not just that aspect, which might be what brought them in the door, but holistically to see how their life really improves. That is the most rewarding feeling I can imagine in a professional setting. And what's held me back is just, I don't have time to do that with everybody, but I know that the message is real. I know that it's applicable, and I know that I can tell it. So that's why I wrote the book, is literally, if I can affect an even greater number of lives, that's tremendous. And that's, since the book is launched, that's really been the path, is, the sales have been good and all that, but actually there has not been a day since the book launched in late March where I haven't at least gotten one message from someone, whether it's, an email, a text, Facebook, or a letter even, just saying, thank you, this is what it's done for me. And the book's not long, so there are people who have read it the day that they got it. I mean, my brother actually bought a copy and said he just flipped it open to have a look at it, and an hour and a half later he had read the whole book and he's making all these changes. And I was like, that's great to hear. I didn't expect it at all. But that's kind of what's happening is people are digging in right away. They're asking themselves those tough questions, and they're implementing changes that they've been thinking about for a while, but just haven't been able to do it for any variety of reasons. And we've all gone through that or are going through that in many different aspects of our lives. So that's why I wrote the book. And that's what I love. I love these messages. I see it, the reviews on Amazon and iTunes, people are getting it. So in that sense, I don't care if I don't sell another copy. I know that the work is actually impacting lives. I care just because another copy means it's one more person who could be touched by it. But at least I know I've had an impact on several hundred people now that I would not have had a chance to help otherwise.
Well, yeah, you certainly are making an impact and changing people's lives with this. And that's why, I consider you to be an influencer. So let's know what's next for Bryan Falchuk. What have you got going?
Yeah, so I want to continue to get this message out there. And so, interviews like this, those are definitely some of the things that I'm focused on right now, but the more people I can work with, the better. So, I'll continue to do coaching work, hopefully have some opportunities to speak on the message as well. I do have a plan. People have asked me, was there a second book in there? There is. I'm not working on it yet, but there's a path through the book where I ask people to come back and tell me, how have you done a day? What's your story? And I would love to do a follow-up book that it's not a collection of my ways of applying it, but it's showing you other examples, you'd ask me for different situations. I want to pull together other situations from other people. Because one of the things that makes this really powerful is the relatability. If people look at me and they say, oh, he's fit and he's successful and whatever, it's very easy to judge that, like, I must have just had it easy. No, I was obese. And so when I talk to you about losing weight, it's not theoretical. I've been exactly where you are. When I talk to you about struggles at work, when I talk to you about medical struggles or parenting, any of that, I have been there myself. That relatability is really powerful. It seems to be really powerful for people to be able to take in the message. So if I can do a follow-on book that chronicles the stories of many others who I know are living this approach, I think that'd be really valuable. I
think that would be extremely powerful. It's one of the most powerful messages I think people can receive from something like that is that they're not alone.
Yeah.
So what, how can folks find out more about Bryan Falchuk and get a copy of Do a Day?
Yeah. So you can go to doadaybook.com. And there's, a variety of links within there to learn more about me, about the book, about coaching and speaking opportunities. But there's a link that's a shop. And if you click there, I've got a link out to basically every format you can possibly imagine. So it's, you can find it on Amazon as well, but I've got a link straight to Amazon there. So if you want to buy it on Kindle or print from Amazon, you can get it from me directly. You can get a signed copy. You can get it on iBooks, Nook. You can find it in Barnes & Noble's website. It's really, I don't really care where people buy it. Some people are like, what's the best way for me to buy it? So whichever way you prefer. I'm not in this to make money. I'm in this to change lives. I think if you have a real purpose, you'll do fine otherwise. So my goal is, let me impact as many lives as possible. Go to doadaybook.com, click on that shop link, and however you want to pick it up, I'm honored for anyone who wants to buy it. And I just ask that you do read it. I think you'll find that, it's a quick read. You can really take it in, but please do spend that time reading it and then really thinking through what that means in your context.
Remarkable story. Bryan, I got to thank you for coming on the show today and sharing this information. It's very powerful stuff, and it does touch so many people. I think there's less people that it wouldn't affect than it does. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, I really appreciate the chance.
All right, folks. Though there you have it. Definitely check out Bryan's book, doadaybook.com. And we'll have a link on the show post. Until next time on Influencers Radio, remember, you are the only real game changer.
You've been listening to Influencers Radio. To get all past shows and updates on future shows, visit influencersradio.com today or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/influencersradio.